We had nothing to
Three's
fiddle
the
with.
winner.
All right,
Three's the
we're
winner.
rolling for the last time, I promise.
You'll be an expert too.
Okay,
Where in
I
South
am Willie
Carolina?
Willie L.
Wait, wait till somebody's done talking.
This, where in South Carolina? This is,
Oh,
okay.
Greeleyville, South Carolina.
But first you got to start off with your name.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Okay, my name is Willie L. Bennett, better known as Billy Bennett. My family came from Greeleyville, South Carolina, near King Street, South Carolina, and Manning, South Carolina, right along 95. I was born in the Lancaster St. Joe Hospital.
Where did you live in Lancaster?
My first home in Lancaster was 335 North Street. I just lived there until I was 5 years old. Then we moved to 313 Green Street, and we stayed there till in the 60s, and then we moved to 537 South Lime Street.
Who were your neighbors in those different locations?
My neighbors on North Street were Mr. Earl Brodus on one side and the Washington family on the other side. On the Green Street, I had the Dennisons, the Stewarts, the Butch Patterson, and the Bears, and Billy Phillips and Harold Phillips. And then on Lime Street, it was difficult to remember those people because it was a different time.
Who were your running buddies and your friends?
My running buddies were Tommy Hyson, Victor Hurdle, Butch Robinson, and numerous people.
What schools did you attend throughout your?
I started off at E.E. Higbee on
Could you
Dal-
say the schools I attended, or because I'm not sure everyone would know what they were.
Okay, the schools I attended were E.E. Higbee on Rockland Street, and then from Rockland Street to George Washington, and from Washington to Edward Hand, and from Edward Hand to J.P. McCaskey.
What churches did you attend?
I grew up in Bethel AME Church, and plus I went to Vacation Bible School at the Mennonite Church on Christian Street and Locust.
What businesses and stores do you remember that were around you? Tell us what businesses and stores you remember.
Well, in the 7th Ward back in those days, there was a Jewish store on every corner. And then my mother had a restaurant at 405 South Duke Street, and then there was Levi's restaurant on Chester and Duke, and then Miss Lucas had a restaurant on Christian and North Street. So, and there was the drugstore, the sanitary market. There was a drugstore on Chester Street, and there was a drugstore on Locust and Duke. And then there was George's Steak Shop on Howard Avenue and Duke. And there was a lot of bars.
What kind of, tell us what activities you were involved in after school every day.
Mainly, I was involved in sports. I played after school. Went to the Christmas Attic Center, played ball there, and then from there, I went to the boys' clubs. And those activities, I think they saved me. Because when I was going to the Christmas Attics, the crew of people that I was hanging around with weren't headed in the right direction. And when I started going to the boys' club on Persian Avenue, things changed, and I really got into sports and found out that I was half decent.
What did you do in the summer months when school was out?
Well, in the summer months when school was out, my parents didn't let me stay in Lancaster. If they couldn't take me to South Carolina, they would put me on the train with a tag around my neck, with a shoebox with some fried chicken, apple and an orange, and have one of the porters give him a couple dollars and tell him put this boy off in King Street, South Carolina. And I worked in the fields at my grandmom's farm, picking cotton, cropping tobacco, and doing everything that farm people do.
Where did you go for recreation, like what local parks or community centers? You kind of mentioned a little bit about the Christmas as swimming areas.
We didn't, in Lancaster, we didn't have any place to go swimming but the Conestoga River, and what the waterworks and the Pogie, and so recreation was playing basketball on the playground, which was a dirt court, and you couldn't tell who was who after the game was over because the dust. We all looked the same.
Where did you work as a teenager?
As a teenager, I shined shoes downtown for every shoe parlor, shoe shine parlor there was downtown, and I worked in my mom's restaurant 7 days a week.
Okay. I want you to expound on about the market. You said you used to work at the market, taking people's groceries.
Oh, okay.
But just like you were continuing to talk and saying after when I wasn't shining shoes, I did something.
Okay, and then at times, sometime in Saturday mornings, me and a few of my buddies would take our wagons down to the market on Queen Street and Vine and help the farmers unload their trucks. And we'd help them set up their stands. And then after that, then we went and shined shoes all day.
What difficulties, if any, did you have in obtaining employment as an adult?
Well, when I first got out of the military, I did communications work when I was in the Army. And I tried to get into Bella, Pennsylvania, but it was a little difficult at that time. And then one of the supervisors saw me play basketball, and Bell Telephone had a basketball team in the Industrial League. And so he told me to go back down and put his name on the back of my application. So that's how I got into Bell Telephone, because when I first went on my own, they denied me.
What did you do at Bell Telephone?
I just wanted to know if you could speak more to the difficulties he had.
That's what I want to.
Because
That's what we want to pull out of this. Like what happened at Bell. Difficult.
why was it difficult
Asking
getting
what-
in
yeah,
first,
say
and
what-
then what happened
You said
there?
what you got in, and then what happened? Like,
Okay, when I got in,
Why was it difficult to get in?
to get in, they told me that I failed the test. And then I said, well, I did this work in the military, and I said, can I see the test? And they said, no. And they said, you can reapply in 3 years. But within those 3 years, I ran into this supervisor at Bella, Pennsylvania, playing basketball at the Y. And he told me, he said, oh, was I interested in working at the phone company? I said, that's where I've been trying to go. And so he said, go back. And so they hired me, but they told me I had to start in the maintenance department, emptying trash cans. And I did that for 2 months. And he said, well, I'll get you out of that. But he said, you just have to have some patience. And I did it for 2 months. And then they sent me to school. And then I did 32 years with the phone company.
what did you do?
I was an installer and repairman. I climbed poles. I did everything.
Can you elaborate about like the difficulties that you had as far as like there was a thing you told me about where you ended up having a lawsuit and everything else? Can you explain what happened? The trials that you went through working at Bell Telephone.
Well, the trials I went through working at the telephone, at being the only the only black on the job out of so many people, it was a lot of things that happened where people would say certain things and they wanted to call me other names than my real name. And so I took offense to a lot of things, and I told some of the supervisors, you know, you better straighten this out, because if you don't, I will. And then my son started working with the phone company, and he did some things that he saw other people doing, and then they dismissed him. So I became a part of a class action lawsuit against Bell Atlantic back in 1997, I think it was. And that didn't go through too well, but it changed a lot of things. And I'm happy I did it. And I was still working there, so I was a little bit nervous working for the same company that you got a lawsuit against. But everything worked out for the best.
What were some of the major news stories that impacted you while you lived in the 7th Ward?
Well, I guess it was one of the major things was when President Kennedy got assassinated, and then we had a lot of marches out at Rocky Springs Park, because in the city of Lancaster, blacks weren't allowed to go anywhere in a pool. And those were some of the things that we saw and I saw. And I didn't march, but I was one of the guys on the sidelines in case anybody decided to interrupt the marchers.
What do you what do you think about the Seventh Ward? So often you hear people say about the ward, and when they talk about it, they say it with such disdain. What do you think about the Seventh Ward? How do you feel about having?
I'm glad I grew up there because it was a safe haven for minorities at that time.
Can you say, glad I grew up in the 7th Ward?
I grew up.
I'm glad I grew up in the 7th
I
Ward.
thought that was kind of a flow into when he said it was safe.
Remember, every time you ask a question, though, it's gonna break up the interview. So when you just to be safe, because if you wanted to start there, we wouldn't know what you're referring to.
Okay, I grew up in the 7th Ward, and I thought it was great because I had my own parents, but everybody in the neighborhood was your parents. So you stayed on course. Because if I did anything wrong in any block or any part of the 7th Ward, it got back home before I got home. And so back in those days, our parents would tell other parents, take care of him, and then when he gets home, he's going to get it again. So I thought it was a great place.
Explain again about working. You did mention about working for your mother in the restaurant. I'd like you to talk about that. Working for your mother in your mother's restaurant, taking her home or security or whatever it is you had to do
Well,
at that age. You got to start with.
In my mother's restaurant, she had me washing dishes. There was no dishwashers. Taking out the trash, and sometimes she would take a nap, and I would have to fry chicken and fish sandwiches for customers. And then if she worked like 5 o'clock in the morning till 9, 10 o'clock every night. And so my job was to make sure to walk her home from the restaurant, because the restaurant was on Duke Street and we lived on Green Street. So I didn't get a lot of sleep because my mom was one of them people that if somebody came in, she had the door locked and they'd knock on the door and say, Miss Bennett, I want a fish sandwich. I'm closed, not her. She would fry a fish sandwich. So it was very trying back in those days because sleep wasn't one of my best buddies.
Describe the 7th Ward, what it looked like as far as like in this time frame, like what kind of houses were they? Lean-tos? Were they shanties? Were they nice frame houses? What kind of houses and the schools and the park? What was the condition of structures in the 7th Ward at that time?
Most of the houses in the 7th Ward were brick and sturdy. There was a few houses in the 7th Ward in certain sections that were dilapidated and run down. But on the whole, most of the 7th Ward was pretty decent. The houses were good. I mean, they tore down a bunch of houses that today we look at them and say, why did they tear those houses down? That's what they did. The redevelopment authority or whatever came through, and they changed the outlook of the 7th Ward.
Identify what you thought was the good section, the bad sections of the neighborhood.
The good sections of the 7th Ward, well, they were all good as far as there was certain areas like Shantytown, Bonnie Gougaro and stuff and Bonnie Gougaro and those places, they were, in the years earlier, they were used as, for the pickers that came here to Lancaster, and they didn't have any running water and whatever down there, no facilities. So most of the 7th Ward was a decent place to live, in my opinion.
What doctors and dentists do you remember did you go to during that time frame?
Back in those days, we went to Dr. Copper and Dr. Travis. And then there was Dr. Robinson, the foot doctor. But we all went to the black doctors.
Were they in the local area?
They were all in the 7th Ward. Dr. Copper was on Duke Street, Dr. Robinson was on Duke Street, and Dr. Travis was on the corner of Vine and Lime.
What hospitals were available to you at that time?
The hospitals available to me at that time were the St. Joe and the General.
What hospitals did your family?
My family mostly went to the St. Joe Hospital.
Is there a particular reason?
that's where they said go.
What nightclubs and dance halls were available?
Nightclubs in Lancaster, back in the day, we went to, when as a teenager, we went to the Oddfellows Hall on Chester Street. They had dances at the Christmas Attic Center, and then as I got a little older, we went to the Elks and the Sturgis and Bing's and the South Pole. We didn't go downtown too much because if we went downtown, we would mix, and there was always somebody going to say something, and tempers would flare. So we stayed in the area.
You might have already said this, but we kind of alluded to it earlier, but I just need you to say what you like the least about living in a ward and what you like best about living in a ward.
I don't think I liked that. There was anything I didn't like about living in the ward growing up there because it was home, and everybody knew everybody, and we kept each other's back, and we did not lock our doors. I never had a key to my house growing up because during those days, you were in the house at a certain time, and there wasn't any home invasions back those days. Oh, it was great. To me, it was.
I want to ask you, could you talk about some of the what's the word I want to use? Your achievements sports-wise. Talk to us about what you did with sports, because you did a lot of things with sports in school as well as after school when you did things for other people, I mean for the young people coming on. I want you to speak to that.
Well, as far as sports is concerned, I played junior high football. I played basketball in junior high. Then I went to McCaskey and I played football and I ran track. And I went out for the basketball team every year and I made the team, but certain coaches didn't like my style from, as we would say, the 7th Ward style. So, and the coach told me that I jumped too high. I never heard that before of anybody jumping too high, but we had a guy that was 6'7", and I was blocking his shots on a regular basis. And the coach told me, go take a shower. And so I handed him my uniform, and I said, I'm going to get ready for track. So, and after school, I played in the rec league. I played a little bit of semi-pro basketball, a little semi-pro football, and I ran track in AAU meets at Villanova University until I was like 27 years old.
Could you brag about yourself a little bit and talk about what the achievements were? You've got a lot of articles and things. What kind of achievements and records? Did you have record standing, or did you have records that had to be broken? How did you do in sports?
Well, I don't want to brag about myself, but back in 1962, at one time I was the #1 high jumper in the Central Penn track league, and I scored a couple times 65 points in a basketball game at the boys club. And basketball was my best sport, but I didn't play that too much here. But when I got in the Army, I made the all-Army team, and my team in Europe, we won the European Championships, and I was the MVP. So I had a nice career playing basketball, and basketball got me in the telephone company also.
When you came out of the service, and I want you to speak about the alumni at the basketball at the boys club. What was the alumni, and what did you do there? What were some things you were trying to achieve, you and your friends?
Well, the Alumni Association was started at the Boys Club. Alumni Association was started on Pershing Avenue when they still had the Boys Club on Pershing Avenue. And Herman Sims was our first president of the Alumni Association. And then I became the president for the next 8 years. And we were giving back to the community, and we ran basketball, wrestling tournaments, and all that at the Boys Club. And then plus, I and one of my buddies, we worked for the Lancaster Recreation Commission also at the same time, and we ran what they call Higbee, now King Playground. We had a summer program and a winter program at the King Playground. So I was very involved in probably a little bit too involved with doing things other than being at home.
Are there any particular stories you can remember about where you've been able to help a particular youth or a group of youths, uh, maybe get them to, you know, refrain from doing something wrong, or encourage them to go on and do some things where they normally wouldn't feel that encouragement?
Well,
Do you
back
have
in
any stories like that?
well back in the day when me and Casey Jones, when we ran Higbee Playground, there was a lot of stuff going on with race riots and, you know, people angry. And between Casey and I and Ted Darkus, we quelled a lot of stuff on the streets because not that we were bad, but through our sports, a lot of the guys that we saw doing things, they respected us. And so when we said something, they kind of listened. You know, they weren't out to say, okay, well, I'm going to kick, you know, whatever tomorrow. But they'd come back and say, man, thank you. Sorry I gave you that crap the other day. But that's what Lancaster community was like back in the day.
What are some of the holiday traditions that you and your family engaged in? What were the main holiday things that you did?
Main holiday things my family did, eat. That's, sorry, but that's what we did. And we didn't do a whole lot of other things outside the home. Because, you know, back in the day, it was, families stayed at home during the holidays. Our parents cooked, and every now and then we might visit somebody else's house, but mostly we stayed at home because there was always plenty of, we might have been poor, but there was plenty of food.
Have just two more questions to ask you. What impact did the educational system have on you during that time frame? And I would like you to speak to the thing about you and the little girl with the dress and the snowball. So my question is, what impact, negative or positive, did the education system have on you while you were born?
Well, when I was in junior high school, I was one of the star basketball players, and there was another buddy of mine named Tommy Ray, and we were the two stars on the basketball team. And at that time, you could go home for lunch, and somebody threw a snowball, and it hit a puddle and splashed up on this girl's clothes. And the girl went back to school and said, well, they knew who did it, talking about me and Tommy, but we didn't know who threw the snowball. So the principal at that time had Tommy Ray stand in one corner and me stand in another corner in the office. And every time somebody came in the office, they saw me in one corner and Tommy in the other corner. So the principal came and said, you guys will never play another day of basketball for Edward Hand if you don't go apologize. And my buddy said, Will, let's go dig the chick. And the principal said, your chick is dug. And he expelled us. We were too young to put out of school. We had to go back to school every 3 days and sign in for the rest of the year. So I got put back because I wasn't in school, but me and my buddy, we had to go and sign in every 3 days at Edward Hand Junior High School.
I think you told me that affected you playing JV or something at McCaskey also. Am I wrong about that? What happened with you being expelled in Edward Hand affected you playing in McCaskey when you went to play at McCaskey?
No, what happened when I got to McCaskey, you know, in junior high school you have these conduct cards, and I had like 3 of them filled, you know, incidents in junior high school. So the principal and the assistant principal at McCaskey called me in the second day at McCaskey, and now my heart is jumping. I said, oh, I haven't got this far. Now, what did I do wrong now? And they told me, said,